5 things I have had to release to become her. I say her like that because I don't think this is about being something that you're not, like you already are. It's about actually returning to yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is we all know who we want to be shown up as, but it's another thing actually doing that consistently, because I think we have kind of times where we're feeling really in flow, we're feeling in alignment and connected to something bigger than ourselves in a sense. So first one has been letting go of trying to write your own story whilst reading someone else's book. I love this analogy because I feel like we can all relate to this on a lot of different levels, and I think in this current space where there is so much content that we can consume across so many different platforms, it's really easy to get sucked into constantly trying to fix yourself, trying to self-develop. Like maybe every piece of content that you listen to is some sort of self-development, and kind of get addicted to that so much to the point where you're not taking action in your own actual life. If you're constantly trying to take inspiration or get inspiration from outside of yourself, like you forget, what do I even think? What do I actually want to put out there? It always connects so much more when things are actually coming from your voice, from your place of understanding. And the same goes for with fitness goals. I think you can constantly start looking what's working for maybe one person. When you're constantly looking outside of yourself, you start changing your direction. So say if you see someone else, something's working, they're thriving, their workout program or their way of eating is working really well for them. So you immediately think, right, I'm going to change what I'm doing, even though what you're currently doing could be working so well, and you're constantly changing direction, possibly every week, and you just lose more and more trust in yourself, in your voice, that it then becomes really hard and your voice becomes like a little just tiny voice that you can't hear anymore. I think that's what definitely happened for me, and it was when I stopped looking outside of myself. I gave myself boundaries with, say, social media. I wasn't starting my day going on social media anymore. I was actually starting my day thinking, right, what are my 3 top goals? Even if it was just 3 things that I'd write down in a morning, that really helped just center in on what is it that I want to achieve today, and also setting clear goals. So say I knew I wanted to change. I thought to myself, if I stay what I'm currently doing for another year, I'm going to be really unhappy. And I think it had gone on for 2 years that I'd felt that kind of way. It's when you get to that point of discomfort that has got to reach a certain amount that you then decide to start taking action. And usually I think that comes from literally breaking everything down. Like I remember just thinking my whole life, like I want to overhaul everything and I want to knock it all down and start building from the fundamentals. Second thing to let go of has been making everything harder than it needs to be, and over complication to the absolute max. I think I've done this for a long time, but I've just not really seen it as overcomplication. But with fitness, with work, even with YouTube editing, with every aspect, it's really easy to start making things more complicated, thinking that they need to be better, and that you can optimize everything. And what I've truly learned in the past year, 6 months, is that simpler is often the better. Less is often so much more, and we don't need all the fluff, we don't need all the extra stuff. And it's kind of like, when you meet someone, say if you meet someone super successful and you think that they're going to be not human, when actually they're just the same as you and I. Like we are all the same. It's just about how we do things and also how much we get skewed from our path. And I think for a while you could start mistaking, thinking, right, I need more discipline, when actually you might just need more simplicity. I also have something later on in this video that's going to help you with all of this and keep it very uncomplicated. And I've noticed this with even people that I work with. Sometimes when you have someone come in and they start overcomplicating, adding too many strings to something, you can't really make a decision and it all just becomes very overwhelming and nothing ever really gets done. Whereas when you just focus on like one step at a time, the simpler the better, breaking down that big goal rather than just writing down, these to-do lists that we do. You can write 20 things and get minimal things ticked off this really long list. Is a really good example of how it's better just writing down like 3 core things that actually move the needle the most. That is always going to get us way further ahead. When I've tried to overcomplicate things, so say if you're trying to lose weight and you're like, right, I need to be training 3-4 hours, how often does that just backfire anyway? Because you end up way hungrier, you're thinking so much about food, you've added lots of extra stress, you're tired, you're just running yourself into the ground, and you can't actually consistently keep that up because it's not realistic. Whereas when you go back to the basics, the fundamentals, just moving a little bit more in a way that supports your goals, so say if you have got fat loss as your current goal, moving in a way like doing something like just adding on more steps to your day, and that way you're not spiking your hunger as much, and just like bringing it back down to the simple things. The other thing as well is maybe you've not been tracking your nutrition right, and then you're thinking maybe I need to go low carb because Becky on Instagram is low carb and she looks the way she does, but she has totally different lifestyle. She could be maybe a high rocks athlete and she's, you know, doing something totally different, and you're comparing yourself, maybe you're in an office job and you're comparing yourself to someone whose actual job is to do fitness, you know, all day, day in, day out. It can easily get really complicated and then you just feel super overwhelmed. So it's always about bringing it back to the fundamentals and realizing like it doesn't need to be so hard as what we make it. It's just stripping down what is not working. Like, don't carry on going down that rabbit hole, down that spiral, and just getting back to like a baseline, and then you can add from there, like based on what is working. Third thing is using fullness to avoid the empty. It goes way back to when I was probably a little girl, and also just what I've always been comfortable with. So I'm someone who's always had a really big appetite, and this may be very niche as in what I'm about to say, but I used to fill my stomach up to the point where it was always uncomfortable, as in like that was just something that I've done for as long as I can remember. Like, I would just usually walk around with maybe more of a bloat. My idea of full was stuffed. When I had, say, a fat loss goal, that was something that I had to kind of address and realise was an actual, say, something that needed looking at. And I've done a lot of work through journaling, through talking therapy over this past few years, and really kind of gone back to the root of that, which was a lot around just, you know, it goes back to literally how I used to eat as a child. So I know I wasn't allowed to, say, leave the table unless I'd polished off my plate, and I used to get given very big sized portions. When you go back to just learning a little bit more about why you do certain things in a certain way, it's really helpful going back to things like that when they do come up, because this was what kept me stuck, and also it didn't really help my relationship with food over the years, because food was something that I used more as a coping mechanism, which I hadn't really realised until I was addressing things in my life, like why, say, I didn't feel happy in my own skin, or like I felt like I wasn't the version that I wanted to be. It's so much better when you actually understand yourself more on a deep level, and also why you might have done certain things and what you're trying to soothe. And I think I was trying to soothe a lot of emotions, a lot of things, always with food. Like, I would always turn to food, and it's only when I've addressed those things I've managed to not only change my body, change my mindset, and improve my relationship with food, and see it more as something that is nourishing my body, not stuffing my body, making me feel sluggish, uncomfortable, and just in pain at points, because I would be so full, say, after certain things. Fourth thing is calling it balance when actually it was avoidance. So I got into this really funny habit where, say, if I felt like I was making good progress, whether it would be in a project I was working on with a fitness goal, like say if I'd been really consistent for a week, I'd kind of think, right, I'm gonna go and get a takeaway, I'm gonna really overindulge. And that was just a habit. That was like part of my thought patterns from a really old rooted space, and I felt like I'd evolved from that, but hadn't like addressed those kind of thoughts. So it was actually realizing that like it was because I didn't want to hold myself accountable. And I think this is a lot to do with fear in disguise, and you wouldn't really guess it. So I think when you can kind of see what is part of maybe an old belief, like why am I calling this balance? Like, of course you can eat your food out, like have nice meals with friends, family, go for, you know, meals at restaurants, and it's not about that, but it's like separating, okay, I can order a Domino's, I can enjoy my pizza, but do I need 2 packs of cookies? That's like 8 cookies when I can just have 1 cookie, you know? And calling myself out a bit more, because that was something that I'd kept consistent for a real long time. And then fifth thing is thinking in days instead of decades. I had a real short-term mentality for such a long time. Everything felt like a sprint, but I wasn't really going anywhere. That is what keeps you staying the exact same, because you're not thinking of, okay, where am I gonna be in 3 months' time? And I've really learned a lot on this lean build journey that I've been on, how with fat loss, say, you can see quick changes instantaneously, like week on week, you're seeing new lines, new things, whereas muscle growth is a much slower process, and you're seeing smaller kind of changes in your physique. You're wondering if things are working, and there's a lot more room to kind of think things aren't going well. It's like anything, isn't it? Like when you can think, okay, in 6 months' time, I'm gonna be in a better position metabolically, I'm gonna be healthier, I'm gonna feel much better, I'm gonna have built more muscle mass underneath that tissue. So then maybe in a year's time, if I do another fat loss phase, or in 6 months' time when I do a fat loss phase, I'm gonna be able to achieve fat loss at a much higher, say, amount of food, and I'm not gonna have to drop my food so low, because if you think about, you can't stay in a fat loss phase forever because your metabolic rate is going to keep dropping, your quality of life is also going to deteriorate. So the minute you can start thinking of long-term you is when things will really shift. And it's like whatever you can delay with gratification always pays due dividends. Constantly choosing what supports your future self. And I think also when you can get as clear as possible on this future self, and is that truly actually what you want, and being specific as possible. And another thing is, say if you are fixated on being maybe a certain weight, a certain scale weight that you could have been when you were literally 19 years old, and you're fixated thinking that that is what you want, but in reality you want to have more energy. When I was 18, 19, I was having like a meal a day and not nourishing my body, didn't have any responsibilities in a lot of ways, and it'd be like silly to think that I would want to be in the same body as that. Or like, you know, when you actually just break things down, I think, right, what did my life look like then? And being kind of grown enough in your head thinking, I would much rather be in a healthier body, be able to have, you know, regular menstrual cycles, be able to conceive children in the future, like thinking more like that, level-headed. I know it's hard sometimes, but being honest with yourself about what is the most important thing. Like, health should always be top priority because we would have nothing without our health, you know, and just slowing down to see the long game. Right, let me put this into perspective, break things down, start working towards this version of yourself you want to become. Things then start to fall into place, things fit a lot easier, and you also feel calmer within yourself because you know you're on the right path. So they're the 5 things I would say have been the biggest things that I've had to let go of over this past 6 months, and have really helped with this reinvention journey we have been on together. If you are feeling stuck with your training, with your nutrition, I've got you covered. You already know. Inside the Flowness Club is where I have my structured programs if you are feeling a little bit like you need some support there. And we've just recently started our next Lean and Align 8-week challenge, which you can join anytime. It's a 4-day gym split. You get your workout program, you get the support from our amazing flowy girlies who are in the community supporting you every step of the way. We have our weekly calls as well, and so much more. My recipes are in there and all of that good stuff. I would love to see you inside the Flowness Club. I feel like you would feel very much at home in there. Just wanted to say thank you so much for being here as well. I really appreciate you. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.